Hello again, everybody. I'm Ty Collins, and welcome to the latest edition of the Lawrence University Career Center podcast, where every month we connect with the Lawrence alumni to check out what's happening in their career and see what advice they have for current Lawrence students. And today I'm joined by Jismy Raju from the Lawrence class of 2011. She earned a degree in Spanish and economics from Lawrence, and while at Lawrence, part of the first Posse on campus, which is a college access and leadership program, and she's still involved with them as an alum today. Also during her time at Lawrence, she was part of the fencing team and the marketing director of Lawrence International Club, and currently she serves on the LUAA board. While at LU, Jismy interned with Nestle and Travelers Insurance, and she'd go on to spend 6 years at Travelers in a variety of roles. Jismy also earned her MBA at the Wharton School of Business. That was followed by 2 years at Monday.com. She recently celebrated her 1-year anniversary at LinkedIn as a senior customer success manager. As a first-generation student, Jismy is passionate about helping others in their career journeys. Jismy, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
What does a senior customer success manager at LinkedIn do?
I think the right question is, what doesn't a senior customer success manager do?
Okay.
Doesn't do. So I think the best one-liner is we're basically a strategic consultant that helps with implementation, onboarding, engagement, and adoption of a project. So I specifically work on LinkedIn Learning, formerly known as lynda.com. So it's a platform that allows you to access over 17,000 different courses in multiple languages. So if you want to learn SQL, or you want to just learn about unconscious bias, those courses are there. And so what happens is post-sales, I will get a customer who has bought this as part of their learning strategy or learning and development strategy. And I'll help them think about, how do we want to roll this out? How do we want to make sure folks are using the platform? And how does this product align with our goals and values? And so we're the voice of the customer for the product. We're counselors, we're product experts, we're troubleshooters, relationship managers, and accountability partners at the end of the day.
Can you tell us a bit more about LinkedIn Learning?
Yeah, so it's a platform that's part of the LinkedIn Learning product. So, everyone has their LinkedIn profile, but you can actually access a large number of courses that are available to you. So if you're interested in, learning, like I mentioned, a little bit more about Excel or SQL or things like that, there are some technical courses there that could be short as 2 minutes to as long as an hour. You can take a series of courses to get certifications and things like that. There are communities there, so other folks that are learning similar things, you can communicate with them as well. And so it's a great way to access information that you might not have available to you, or additional training. So when I was actually in grad school, I did use the product as as an add-on for my classes from a day-to-day perspective.
And some of those longer ones, those certification courses, are actually looked at positively by employers. You can put them on your resume, and they're actually strong credentials for looking for a job.
Yeah, so it's a great way, as at the time, right now as undergrads, you might not have a ton of experience. And so if you take different courses, you can actually post on your LinkedIn profile that, hey, I've completed a course in unconscious bias training, or, insert whatever course. And so they can see those badges and those completions, which show that you are investing in your skill sets.
So you do work for LinkedIn, and I know you have kind of a hybrid work environment, but definitely LinkedIn is one of the bigger organizations in the world with more than 20,000 employees. Can you talk about what it's like to work for a large corporate environment? It's probably hard for Lawrence students who are used to small classroom settings to imagine what that's like.
Yeah, I would say prior to working at a large company, I assumed I would be running around with all 20,000 folks. And reality, you're really only interacting with your team. And typically that's much smaller. So I would say the largest team that I've ever been on is about 20 people, and the smallest is about 6. So from a day-to-day perspective, you don't feel the enormity of the entire organization. But the difference is that at larger companies, you have a lot more resources. You have a ton of people globally that have various levels of experience. So I think the only time I truly felt like I was at a large corporation is when we got together, which is not that often, especially in this environment. Most of it's virtual, so you feel even smaller. Or if you're trying to accomplish something outside of your role that involves you talking to multiple people in terms of hierarchy or chains of command.
Would you say there are probably more opportunities for advancement in a larger company?
I would say so. I think at LinkedIn, one of the biggest things is we talk about your next play. So whether it's internally or externally. And so at a larger corporation, there are all these different roles that you might not even know about. And you have the ability to talk to different folks and learn more about it. So I think from a mobility standpoint, a larger corporation offers that opportunity. Whether it takes longer or shorter, that really depends on, a lot of different factors. So.
Well, a lot of students I work with here at Lawrence tell me they don't want to work for, quote, the man, meaning working for a corporation or even for a for-profit organization. They'll hear things in their classes that they perceive are quite negative about working in business. So why did you choose LinkedIn? And, what would you say in defense of working for a corporation or working in a for-profit environment?
Yeah, I definitely understand their concerns. And the way that I think I've approached for working for different corporations is I focus on three things when I'm looking at any sort of opportunity or job opportunity. I want to understand the vision / the mission of an organization, the people that I'm going to work with, and the product at the end of the day. So for LinkedIn, their vision is they want to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. The mission is that they want to connect the world's professionals to make them more productive and successful. And I really resonated with that because I've seen it work firsthand, how LinkedIn has helped me, interact with people, discover roles that I didn't know that existed. I'm an immigrant, I'm first gen, so my family members were not very well versed in the world of business or in tech. And so LinkedIn was my platform to gain access that is sometimes a barrier to a lot of folks, right? Like if you don't know the right people, how do you find the right people? And LinkedIn really helped me with that. So I resonated in that way. And then secondly, I focus on the people that I interact with. Like I want to make sure I feel comfortable with the people that I'm going to work with from a day-to-day standpoint. And you get that early on in the interview process. The recruiter is the face of the culture of that company. And then when you're meeting with the hiring manager, I think it's really important to take a minute and check in with yourself. Like, do I feel comfortable with this person to meet with them every week and share with them my vulnerabilities, my struggles, what my professional goals are at the end of the day? And so that gives you really good insight on like, can I be happy at this place? And then the product, right? You don't have to be an expert in it. But for me, I wanted to make sure that the product resonated and that I understand the value and can communicate it to a customer that I'm working with. And LinkedIn, I work with LinkedIn Learning specifically. Like I mentioned earlier, I did use it in grad school and found value. So in that way, I knew how to communicate with it. So I would say in the end, focus on whether this corporation's mission and values align with yours. And then also think about it from the perspective, like if you don't want to work for the man or you want to create this change, be that change in the organization. Like corporations do need people to speak up and help create that change because they've been doing it a certain way for so many years. So you do have the opportunity to contribute to that.
Right. And something I'll tell students a lot is coming in as a new employee, you often have new ideas, fresh ideas that people who've been there for a while just don't have anymore. And that's a perspective that employers look for in their new employees.
Yeah. And they really value that when you're a new person coming in, they want to hear it because you're seeing what they've been doing from a day-to-day perspective with fresh eyes. It's not folks who have been there for so long that they can't see outside of that perspective.
Exactly. Could you tell us what the hiring process was like at LinkedIn? I imagine it was more than just an hour-long interview.
Yeah, definitely. So I actually applied through LinkedIn, I found the job on LinkedIn, applied through LinkedIn. I spoke to a few folks that actually worked at the organization as well, just to understand better what I was getting into. But first, the recruiter reached out to me to do a phone screening to understand, what I'm looking for, to see if this role actually fits and any sort of other requirements. And then from there, I had an individual one-on-one with the hiring manager. And then after that, they passed me on to, which is very popular, is like a case study, essentially, or a project that you have to do to demonstrate the different skill set that they were looking for. So they gave me a project. I put together the PowerPoint, did a presentation to a panel of my actual colleagues and a hiring manager. And they gave me feedback on how I did. And then ultimately, the recruiter comes back and decides whether an offer is going to go through. So I've done a number of interviews with other tech firms, and it's similar that case study piece is starting to become pretty popular now in the interview process.
Prior to LinkedIn, you worked at Monday.com. I had never heard of that before speaking with you. What is it?
Yeah, so I worked at Monday.com, and it is a project management and collaboration tool. it is similar to, or the competitors, I guess, would be like Asana, Trello, or Smartsheets. And so it's a great way if you're working with multiple people in an organization or even on a project to track and collaborate on it. So you can put like different due dates, assignments, and just be able to notify people when things are upcoming. So it was a great way to work together on something. I initially started as a mid-market CSM, or customer success manager. And then I got an opportunity to build a different team within the organization to focus on a subset of a customer base that doesn't always get that one-on-one attention from a customer success manager. And that was a really cool experience to build a startup within a startup. We had to, create everything from like the decks, like what kind of data we wanted to track, like how much time we wanted to give to our customers. And so it was a great experience. I wanted to be at a startup and understand how to build something from the ground up.
Okay. After leaving Lawrence, you did go on to get your MBA. What made you decide to do that?
So there were two reasons. One was a very personal one, and one was a more professional angle. The personal one was it was a promise to my mom that I made, whose opportunity to get an education was taken away at a young age due to poverty. And I learned and saw how much her not having an education affected her and like the opportunities and how folks treated her. And so all she's ever wanted was for her kids to get a really good education. She didn't care in what area. She wanted that to be left to us. And so she basically wanted to make sure that we never ever questioned whether we belonged somewhere. And for me, from a professional standpoint, I wanted to go back to school because I wanted to pivot in my career. I started to feel like I was getting a little stagnant. I wasn't learning anymore. I was kind of in an autopilot mode. And I talked to a few folks, and business school was interesting. It piqued my interest to have the opportunity to learn from some of the best in the world, right? Some of my classmates are CEOs of corporations, worked in education, worked in all these different industries. And so to have that opportunity to sit with them and learn from them as much as possible was really exciting for me. So I decided to apply and got into the Wharton School of Business.
How would you compare earning your MBA to 4 years at Lawrence?
Oh, that's a hard one. How would I compare? I would say Lawrence, the 4 years at Lawrence is a time for you to just try and explore everything and basically figure out who you are, versus I think going into doing any sort of master's program, you have to have a little bit of more of a targeted approach because it's a shorter period of time. It's really 18 months instead of 2. And so you do have a little period of exploration, but I think you get more value if you understand what you're going in for.
Well, I want to talk about LinkedIn a little bit again, at least in regards to your own LinkedIn page. There is a video there which takes folks out to YouTube, and it's a speech you gave at Wharton about redefining rejection. For upcoming graduates about to begin their job search, most will experience some level of rejection. We want folks to go watch that video. We'll link it in the description for this podcast. But give us a teaser. What does redefining rejection mean?
The easiest way to put it is looking at rejection and failure differently. Rejection is probably one of the most painful things that folks can go through. I think every one of us can recall that time that we've been rejected by someone or something or a job. And when I wrote that speech, I was looking at how far I've come. And so I had decided to do this exercise that I read somewhere to write down every rejection that I've ever experienced. And I did it in the past 4 years. And I was surprised, just as everyone will be when they hear that number in the video. And what it showed me at that moment was like, wow, I'm still standing, but also how far I've come and how much I've learned. And most of the time we see an opportunity, we go after it, we do everything we can, and that's it. But when we get rejected, it gives us so much more. It teaches us or forces us to accept a reality of life. It forces us to reflect on what we can do better. It empowers us for the next time. But most importantly, it shows us how we need to process our feelings and emotions around it. A lot of times we take rejection so personally, like this is a rejection of me as a person. And what we have to realize, like, we might not be everyone's cup of tea. We might not be the right fit for every environment. There's so many things out of our control, but what we can control is how we see ourselves in the face of that rejection.
That's great. Definitely. And people should go watch that video. We'll have the link in the description, and it's also on your LinkedIn page. Talking about Lawrence, how did Lawrence prepare you for the world of work? And when answering this question, feel free to consider your total Lawrence experience. So classroom, as well as outside the classroom, clubs, organizations, anything you were involved with.
I would say Lawrence prepared me in a couple ways. I think before going into a world that asks you to define yourself, like who you are, Lawrence was like the safest place for me to try everything and talk to everyone without any sort of judgment. I was able to try fencing that I never really had any fencing experience before. I think I tried it once in high school for fun in gym or something like that. And then I ended up being on the team, and it was a D1 team, which I never imagined that I would be part of, and got to interact with people who from different countries that were actually pro fencers and things like that. Like who would have guessed Appleton, Wisconsin is what I would be doing this at. And so I think that was a really cool experience to try different things and be able to just with no judgment. I think that's beautiful. I don't think that's a thing that happens a lot. The classroom discussions really taught me how to have real discussion. You realize people don't know how to discuss things in a safe place, in a right way, where we're hearing each other, how to ask open-ended questions so we truly understand what someone's getting to. And that is so applicable in the world of business or in your career in general. And then lastly, just the environment. Being in the Midwest, I'm a New York City girl. It's a whole nother world out there. And I was really excited to be part of it, but it opened me up to understand like there's another part of the United States that I don't understand. There's a different culture that's out there. And it really prepped me going into any sort of environment, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, here's a very important follow-up to that, and that is, are you still a fencer?
I am not a fencer anymore. It's my fun fact at every job interview.
I'm sure they always ask you, do you still do it? Because I think, is it like riding a bike? You never forget how. You just raise the foil and off you go.
Exactly.
Who gave you the best advice growing up, and how has it helped your career?
I would say it was my dad. He told me to talk to everyone. And I noticed this when we first came to the States. He would take me to the park as a kid and we would, just hang out. And I would always see him talk to different people. And there was definitely language barrier between both of the parties involved. And somehow they managed to have like beautiful conversation, share information. And I would ask my dad, I'm like, why are you just talking to strangers? Like, this is weird. Like you told me stranger danger, right? Growing up as a kid. Yeah. But he said, talk to everyone, and there's always something that you're going to learn. I took that advice in my career. And so I made sure I stayed curious. It's how I learned about the different types of roles that are out there. It's how I learned about different people's journeys, that it doesn't have to be one way. And it's how I gained mentors and sponsors. And I'm not the biggest extrovert in the world. So I understand when people say, like, hear that my advice of like talk to everyone, like that could be a little nerve-wracking. And I'm not saying in the networking perspective, it's like just know that any person that you interact with has a story. So just take a moment to just learn their story. It's less about what you're gonna gain or make that connection.
Not knowing what the future holds can make many of us, probably most of us, feel lost at some point. What should people do when that happens?
I definitely remember being lost at Lawrence. I will tell you that. I didn't feel like I was the most academically inclined. I didn't think I was the smartest person in the room. I wasn't a good test taker. So I definitely struggled to envision myself in any traditional career, like a doctor, a lawyer, or accountant. And it was hard. And what changed for me is that I took that pressure off myself and decided, you know what, I'm going to just take things that I actually enjoy. And maybe on that path, I will figure out what I actually like. And so that's how I ended up being a Spanish major. I really liked learning a second language. I knew I could figure out how to use it if I just talked to different people. Again, that advice my dad said, talk to everyone. Talked to a few folks, learned how a second language could be valuable. Ended up taking an econ class. I think it was part of our requirement, learned about the world of business. And then, thought about like, hey, how can I merge this? And then I also made sure I'm going to do some internships, try things out at the end of the day. Like, who cares if you don't like it? It's just for one summer. You learn something and then you move on. So I kept that open mind. So when you feel lost, I think it's just keep trying because it's data for you and your mind to collect. And then ultimately you'll get closer to what your ultimate goal is, right? So talk to everyone. That's my biggest advice at the end of the day when you feel lost.
Yeah, good advice. Is there anything else you think Lawrence students should take away from our conversation today? Anything else you'd like to share to help them along on their journey?
I would say no decision you make is the wrong decision because it's your decision. And that was something that I had to learn for myself where I was worried what other people thought and, am I doing the right thing? But it's making sure what you're doing fits your values, your priorities. No one else knows it better. And your path doesn't have to be linear. That's something we talk about at LinkedIn a lot is like you can have many rebirths in your career journey, as I did. I started out in insurance, then went to get my MBA, did product management for a little bit, came back. Now I'm in a customer success role in a tech industry. Like, is that what I imagined? Absolutely not. And so I would encourage people to forget about that big name company or do something that would make you look good in the eyes of others. Instead, think about wherever I end up, will I pick up like useful skills to make me better equipped for my dream job? And in this uncertain economic times, like make those small moves. So think about different industries outside of what you think you should be in, right? So for example, in insurance, there are a ton of tech roles. You can be a developer, you can be a product manager. If you want to go into finance, you can do M&A at a tech company. Like, so there's different ways to look at it. So don't feel like you have to do it one way and it's okay. So back to my old advice, talk to everyone. Curiosity is why you're going to be successful, but preparedness is what's going to get you through the door.
You are on LinkedIn. I mean, in more than one way, I guess, but you have a profile on LinkedIn. If students have any further questions for you, can they reach out?
Definitely. I'm happy to reach out. Anyone has questions, send me an email. I'm happy to get on a call and discuss opportunities with you. Or if you just want to talk to someone and figure out, hey, like, what do I do here? So I love Lawrence, so happy to help any fellow student.
Outstanding. That is great. And unfortunately, we are out of time for today. Jismy Raju, Lawrence class of 2011. Thanks for joining us on the Lawrence University Career Center podcast.
Thank you for having me.